wisdom, student enrollment. That's what the class of God students enrolling. Supreme wisdom, I study it hard. The study of myself is the study of God. Supreme wisdom, write your letter, get your X. Supreme wisdom, that's what you'll be getting next. Supreme wisdom, some call it the lessons, but I call it life, actual facts, no guessing.
Now the Punnett square, what we're going to get to, we're talking about the probability of your offspring being able to have certain traits of what's expressed, okay? And so going back to this, now Punnett square, like they said, when we use the Punnett square, so right here, we're only dealing with this trait. When we read all this, every little point, this is going to tell us who we are. But what we're going to do is that, you see for each of these, they're going to cross. So for the T over here, so each of these have to be debated. And whichever one win out of this is going to be what you look like. Okay? And so for, let's say, we're doing it with hand size, right? So say if I'm going to put it like this. Say if I'm putting on this side, it's going to be my father, okay? So on this side of this chart, we're going to say, I'm going to write down my father's genotype, or I'm going to write down what's on the inside of my father, which are, since I have two, every human being has two. He got one from his mother and his father. So we're going to say that his genotype is big hands and small hands. That's what's on the inside of him. Question, if this is his genotype, what is his phenotype? If this is what's on the inside, what do I see on the outside? If this is dealing with hand size.
Could be either one, whichever one's down.
No, this is my father. This is my father.
Okay.
This is what's on the inside of him. I'm not getting with the children yet, because right here on the inside, we're going to determine the children. But just for right here, this is my father, and this is his phenotype. I mean, his genotype, as in big hands and small hands.
What's his phenotype?
Yes.
Big H.
So what size is his hands on the outside?
H, big H.
Big H. So he's going to have big hands.
Right.
But he carries the gene for both big and small hands.
Right.
But my mother, her genotype is 2 capital H's. So this is my mother. What size are her hands, big or small?
Big.
Why? Because she has both dominant genes for the big hands, right? And so now we're going to look at the probability of when these two people, this is one person, but each person has two alleles for one trait.
Right.
When they make children, we're going to see the probability of their offspring having big or small hands. So now, what we do is that we just simply cross the genes inside of here. So in this square right here, we're going to cross the H from here and the H from here. So when we cross that, what type of phenotype do we get? We get the H and H. This represents one child. Right. The probability that one child is going to have H and H cross. So this is their genotype. But what is their phenotype? This is what is on the inside, but what is it on the outside?
Big H.
Big H, so they're going to have big hands.
Right.
Now, if we take, again, now cross the genotype for here. So now we have one big H from mom and one small H from dad.
Right.
So this is the genotype of another child. It's child's 2 genotype. It's child's 2 hands, big or small?
Big.
Big, right?
Right.
Because as long as there's a big H, even if there's a big H and a small H, the big H will always win. Okay? So now let's cross these two alleles and find the genotype for child number 3. So it's a big H and a big H, so this child will have big H, right?
Right.
So is this child's hands big or small?
Big.
Big. Because it's 2 H's, big H's, 2 genes for big hands, they're both dominant, so you're going to have big hands. And so on the last one, we're going to cross these two, and now there's big H, little h. So this is child number 4. Child number 4 has the genotype big H, small h, but are their hands big or small?
Big.
Big. So what they're saying is that with this genetic markers for both of these parents, that there's a 100% chance, just with this 100% probability, so it's saying that all their children will have big hands.
Right.
There's no getting around. All their children will have big hands. Okay. Why? Because as long as there's that dominant H there, that lowercase h will never be expressed. This goes to the law of dominance. An organism with a allelic form of a gene will express the form that is dominant. So this part is hidden, this part is dominant. But the thing about it is hidden, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just not expressed. So that is being carried over in that person's genetics, but they don't know that it's there. So how do we find out that it's there? We're going to take child number 2. Child number 2 is going to go off and get married, and then they're going to get married to somebody who has small hands. Child number 2 has big hands. He's going to get married to a woman that has small hands. What would the genotype of somebody who has small hands look like?
Small H, small H.
Small h, small h. So now, this is child number 2. This is the father. Child number 2 has now become a father, and he went off and got married to a woman with small hands. So the fact that she has small hands lets us know that her genotype is small h, small h. Because that's the only way she's going to be able to express her small hand gene is if she has inherited 2 small h's from both her parents. Now let's look at their children. We're going to do the same cross, we're going to do it a little bit quicker. So we cross here, we get big H, small h, small big hands.
Big.
Big hands, because there's a big H. Cross here, there's big H, small h.
Big.
Big hands. Now we're going to cross here. This is small h, small h.
Small.
Small hands, and we're going to cross here. And so now this is small h, small h. So what they're saying is that half of their children are going to have big hands, and half of their children are going to have small hands. So now we took from 2 big hand people, we didn't know what was in their genetic makeup, but they had children, right? And they produced nothing but big hand children. So at this point, they thinking that, oh, we just got big hands in this family, right? But then this one who didn't know that on the inside of him he had small hands went out and married a small hand woman. And then when they had children, he found out at that point he carried the gene for small hands. He didn't know he did because at that whole point he just believed that he only had small hands in his family. It run in my family. I mean, big hands run in my family. But what he actually found out when he went out and married somebody he knew he had small hands, now he realized, uh-oh, that was inside of me the whole time. Hiding. It was hiding. So he was a carrier of this gene.
Right.
Which is small hands, which is a recessive gene. But the only way he was going to find out that he was a carrier of that recessive small hand gene is if he married somebody he knew had small hands.
Right.
If he married another big hand person, technically, let's do this one more. He couldn't see, but this sister had small hands, right? So he was like, you know, my mama said don't trust no small hand girls, you know. So he was like, I got this, mom. He went out and found one with the biggest hands he saw. But this was her genotype, right? He was like, oh yeah, we can have a bunch of big hand children. We can dribble the ball real good, you know, play football, they're gonna be athletes, you know. So they go and have children. He didn't marry that other one, you know, he met on the internet, they met in person, and he looked at him and was like, this is not gonna work. So he went out and found him another person. So now he went and married this sister with big hands. And they had children. Let's do the cross. Cross here and here. You get 2 big H's. Cross here and here. Big H, small h. Cross here and here. Big H, small h. Cross here and here. Whoops. Small h and small h. So guess what? They had 1, 2, 3 children. They like, if we just have one more, we can start ourselves a basketball team, right? And so it was like, they got these big hands, they're gonna be good at it. But then on child number 4, when they wanted to complete the team, child number 4 came out with small hands. How did that happen? Because both of them carried a recessive gene that they didn't know that was there. So they both carried the gene for small hands and didn't know it because they had big hands. The small gene wasn't expressed. But when they had children, this child said, I'm gonna take this from you and this from you. And when that 2 came together, they found him a small hand child. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to state that these are probabilities.
Yeah, I said that in the beginning.
Okay.
This is probability.
But this is what I want to put in that with the grafting process of Yahoo. You can isolate the recessive as long as you isolate it and you don't allow it to come back in contact with the dominant.
Right,
Okay?
right.
So now,
Which is why the law is so strict
right,
in marriage.
right. Because now let's go back and revisit in your mind, crack open your, what time is it? Go in your mind and crack open your message to the black man or the section of making the devil, right? We say, Yaqub said his grafting process was actually a separation process. So instead of what they say grafting is when you take something from another, you attach it to something else. He said grafting that Yaqub did was separation. When I made those 4 boxes, what did I do?
Separate.
I separated, right? I isolated the genes of 2 people,
Right.
and then I was able to sort the probability that that offspring would come a certain way, and so that way I was able to know, because since I was looking to be able to express a certain phenotype, you know, in the offspring in the later generations, I knew what I had to have in the beginning, right? So you remember what he said? He met the first girl. When he just looked at her hands, he knew she wasn't the one. Because he can tell from what was expressed that she was a small gene hand carrier. So he purposely went and found some other woman that had big hands so that he could create offspring that big hands. But it wasn't until they had their 4th child, which we dealing with probability. I'm oversimplifying. It wasn't until he had that 4th child that he realized that both of them were the carrier for the small hands. So, you know, somebody say, well, if it's this easy, why didn't Yaqub, why did it only take 1 generation for Yaqub to make the next type of people? Because this right here, this is probability. This is only dealing with a probability. This is not exact saying if you have 4 children, they're gonna come out with this, because you might have 4 and they all have big hands, or you might have 4 and they all have small hands. But this is just the probability based off of what we can see just by isolating a trait or a gene that we can see. We can increase our probability of creating offspring that has that same trait.
Right.
You understand? But it's only until we were able to separate the genes. Now, interestingly enough, when Yaqub said he saw 2 people inside one man, aren't there 2 people inside this man?
Right.
It's a big hand person and a small hand person. One he got from his mother, one hand he got from his father. So when he got with somebody else who had 2 people inside of them, they created another person who had 2 people inside of him. So we all, for lack of a better term, have 2 people inside us.
Right.
But the one that's being expressed is the one that has the dominant expression. Only the dominant is going to be expressed. I feel like I've spent a lot of time on that, which I didn't want to do, because I want you all to do this cross. But yes, ma'am.
Well, this may be for a later time, but using this chart, this Punnett square, you literally can figure out how many times you
Right.
have to do this in order to produce.
Right. And so now if we want to have only big hand children, that means that nobody.
I was thinking the recessive, how it could go, how many,
Same thing with the recessive.
Right.
But the thing about it is that we can only track the dominant because recessive is always hidden until it pops out. But once we isolate you, now say if we were trying to shoot for small hands. When this person came out, we knew for a fact that genetically they were double recessive.
And so they would marry a double recessive.
Right. And so for a fact, if we want to make sure that the child comes out just as light as they are,
Right.
right?
Right.
We have to make sure that small hands go out and marry somebody like the woman that he passed over, who
Right.
we knew for a fact had small hands. See, when you're dealing with dominant genes, they're so strong, you just gamble. Because with dominant genes, if you have this genotype or this genotype, you're gonna get big hands. But the only way to have a, an offspring that expresses a recessive genetic trait is if they have two
Right.
recessive genes, right? So to ensure that this process happened, what would you have to do? After this child came out, what did Yakub do?
You would mate it with the recessive gene.
You would, Yakub's grafting process, when the child came out dark,
You
they would poke it in the head, right? They'll go kill it, get it out the way.
But you have to separate it from the dominant, because
That's right.
anytime the dominant comes back in.
So go back to Yakub. What was his top five top laborers?
Liars.
That they were that too, absolutely. But his 5 top laborers were the doctor,
The minister.
the minister,
cremator,
the
and
nurse, the cremator, and
Did you say nurse? It was 4.
doctor.
The minister,
Nurse,
the doctor,
minister,
the cremator,
cremator.
and the nurse.
It's 4. Thank you. 4. His 4 laborers. Yeah, doctor, minister, cremator, nurse. What was the minister's job to do, right? He would only, his job was to make sure that he only would give out marriage license to those 2 people that were light skinned,
Recessive.
right? Or recessive in this case, if we're talking genetics. So that was his job, to clock them at the door. Like, I'm not going to even allow y'all to get married, right? And then the doctor's job, what was the doctor's job to do?
Take your blood.
To take their blood and run a blood test and see if they were genetically, right, able to make it. And he said they even do that to this day. They try to check your blood, do some blood work, and see if any of you all are carrier of recessive traits, so they can let you know the possibility of your child having a defect, right? And then sometimes they be like, well, you got sickle cell, you know, in your family, and you got sickle cell in your family, so you 2 getting married have a high risk of having a child that has sickle cell, right? So they be like, that's something y'all got to consider, if not getting married at all. And then the nurse's job would be to what? Once this recessive person came out, this recessive baby came out, they would, right, take the baby,
With that baby.
and then they would say that the baby was like going to be a great man,
Yes.
right? They would, you know, hold this baby over the other one, right? But then
Especially if it
also,
was a male.
right, and then they would, of course, have to separate this child from the other
darker
ones,
children.
the darker children who they know for a fact carry the gene for a dark. So then you run the risk, the probability of having, if you have this cross, you ain't gonna have no children with that recessive gene. But it wasn't until we crossed this with this that we at least got one child that had it. But if you cross this and somebody else who's double recessive, you know for a fact that you will have, their children will come out with their recessive gene. Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to mention what you said last time, and it had to do with, they were specifically targeting the male child.
Yes, they were specifically charged, and I wanted to do research on that, and I didn't have time, but I thought that was strange that they always talk about, you know, not they, the messenger specifically, he was talking about this whole thing about don't mix with white people, right? Don't
Right.
race mix, don't sweetheart with white people. He says it's a trick, because he's saying that they're trying to destroy the black man, and he said that, you know, they don't allow you to mix with them, but they will mix with you. Well, my thing, I asked myself the question, well, if a white man get with a black woman, he's mixing with a black woman, so isn't he destroying himself? But the messenger said that basically they make sure that we don't allow to mix with them, but they'll mix with us. In the connotation that he was saying, he was talking about males. So it's something that's carried on the male gene. There are certain traits that are, you know, sex-oriented, just like we call it male pattern baldness, right? Because it's usually only expressed in males because it carries on the male gene, the male chromosome, right? But you inherit it from your mother, but it's usually expressed in you. So she might have it, but she might not be bald, but you are. Because she's a carrier of that gene, because it codes on, you know, certain, you know, sex chromosomes, where it's like male, female. When I'm talking about sex, is like only, this will only code on the female chromosome instead of the male. But anyway.
I just wanted to tell you that the messenger said that it's the nature. The male passes the nature, so the nature of the child comes from the male gene.
Supreme wisdom, some call it the lessons, but I call it life, actual facts, no guessing.